Welcome on in, everybody. Today, a Rapier Firestaff PvP build for you guys. Full build guide and, of course, some gameplay at the end if you guys want to check it out. And there's a written guide on my website, pvpnewworld.com, if that's more your fancy. But this build, this patch, feels good. I mean, obviously, Firestaff got a pretty extensive rework. Is it stronger or weaker than last patch? Honestly, I think it feels about the same, but Firestaff is a lot cleaner and smoother to use, and it synergizes better with the various skills that it has now. So, in general, I think this is a very good build for this patch at the moment. Firestaff Rapier has excellent damage, excellent mobility, you've got great ranged and physical options, and of course, you've got a ton of different escapes and defensive utility with this weapon setup too. The Firestaff does fantastic long-ranged and AoE damage, while Rapier has that really powerful up-close burst. This is a build that I've been playing for a very long time, and I really enjoy this build's playstyle. This is probably my favorite build to play in the game, and it's a great patch for it. So, without further ado, let's take a look at that build, guys. Starting off with the attributes. So, I'm playing Firestaff and Rapier, but I've got a lot of points in dexterity. I know that this is the patch of Firestaff, and Firestaff got some pretty big buffs. If you want to play this as more of a Firestaff damage dealer, by all means go ahead and put more points in intelligence. The reason that I've gone this route is two things. Number one, the 150 points is going to reduce the cost of my roll by 10 less stamina, giving me a 40 cost roll in light armor. This is a massive deal for my sustain, survivability, and mobility. And then as well, I get a little bit more crit chance from going for the 50 points in dexterity. But the big advantage of splitting these stats between intel and dex is that I actually gain quite a lot of rapier damage. I lose about 20% Firestaff damage for not putting the points in intel, but I'm going to gain around 17% rapier damage and of course the additional crit chance and the additional sustain. So at the end of the day, this actually works out quite well for this build. The Rapier hits very hard and the Firestaff still hits pretty hard too. 210 intelligence actually goes pretty far if you have all of the rune glass gems on your gear and of course are in light armor for all those bonuses. Yeah, by no means is the Firestaff damage lacking on this build, even at 210 intel. Again, it's up to you guys how you want to play this. Moving on to the last bit, it's the Constitution. I'm still going for 150 in con for the critical damage reduction. You could actually play this build with less con if you really wanted to, or even more con, probably not up to the 300 mark. Again, kind of up to the user, but I think 150 is a pretty good sweet spot for a PvP build. So let's take a look at the gear that I'm running on this guy. Starting off with my weapon, the Rapier is the Officer's Ceremony. Penetrating backstab, vicious, keenly empowered. Now I am playing an Iron Man playthrough. This is the best Rapier that I have on this character. Ideally, I would like to have an attunement perk as well as keenly jagged and then penetrating backstab or rogue. The reason I want this combination is because of the extra damage effects from the attunement and the bleed. These effects actually count towards your rapier tree, giving you a little bit more stamina sustain for every dot that ticks on them, and the attunement counts as an additional hit too. So this can go a really long way for your sustain and still be a very powerful offensive rapier. So that's the reason I want to go that route. I think Officer's Ceremony is probably one of the hardest hitting rapiers in the game though, so just for the sake of damage, this is definitely a great option. And then the Augmented Ignited Gem. 40% of the damage converted to fire, and hits will inflict burn, dealing that fire damage per second for 2 seconds. Again, adding that burn is huge for Rapier's sustain. If you don't have the other perks on your Rapier, you at least want to make sure you have the augmented perk that gives you the dot, be it fire damage for this build or any other dot for whatever build you're playing. Now, moving on to the Firestaff. Empowering Fireball, Enchanted, Keenly Empowered. I would like to have Empowering Fireball, Vicious, and Keen Speed. Keen Speed is a huge deal for survivability in PvP, and I definitely feel not having it at the moment. But this is still a great option. This is the OPR Firestaff, and it is my best in slot. Empowering Fireball still being my perk of choice for the Firestaff on the staff itself, simply because of the amount of damage it gives Fireball. Yeah, really like this. And I've gone with the Ignited Gambit, again, adding that burn for damage over time, and of course, the additional damage when the stamina is not full, which is pretty often when you're using a Firestaff. Now, moving on to the gear, starting off with the hat, Elemental Aversion, Resilient, Invigorated. The ideal perks here are the Elemental Aversion, Resilient, and Freedom, and I have a few really nice pieces that do have all 3 of those perks. My boots have physical aversion, resilient freedom, which is also a really good option. And then the pants, shirking energy, you definitely want to have. And then resilient. Ideally here, another elemental or physical aversion as well. But for the most part, my armor is actually pretty close to best in slot. There's just 3 perks that I would change across all of my armor. So yeah, really, really good setup like this. Elemental aversion, massive for this patch. For the most part, you're just going to be stacking thrust resist and elemental aversion to give you the best damage reduction that you can this patch. Maybe some slash resist if you want to throw that in there. But this is, I think, pretty meta right now for PvP, especially with Firestaff being popular. And then for the armor, the rune glass gems that I use are the increased fire damage gems, mixed with whatever other gem I have here to reach these desired % damage reductions. In general, I think the fire damage is the way to go. It's going to up your rapier damage and up your Firestaff damage. That being said, because Firestaff is meta this patch, maybe there's a good argument to go maybe all lightning damage and then run lightning on the rapier and change half of the Firestaff damage to lightning. I don't know. It really depends who you're fighting and how much fire resist they have. I think because most people are running Ellie aversion instead of really high fire resist, fire damage works really well because the Ellie aversion will not reduce the damage that your rapier fire attack does. So yeah, kind of up to the user here. I think that's something that I'd have to go test, and I'd love to hear what you guys think about maybe trying a lightning fire mage or something like that. Moving on to the jewelry, the amulet, stamina recovery, health, shirking, and power, the champion's amulet that you get from the PvP reward track. This is best in slot. Maybe changing out shirking and power for divines would be a good option too if you don't have the champion's amulet. But yeah, the additional damage, really nice from here. And then the champion's ring, hardy, keen awareness, and invigorated punishment. Invigorated punishment, I think, is going to be pretty meta this patch, especially with light armor getting a pretty big nerf to the shirking fortification pieces that it gets. If you have a shirking fortification piece on your light armor and you roll, you only get that bonus to your actual armor value. So if you're fighting someone who has invigorated punishment and you roll in light armor with 1 piece of shirking fortification, the 2% bonus damage that they do will be more damage than the amount of armor you gain from your shirking fortification. This is a big reason why I say you definitely want to run Ellie or physical aversion in light armor this patch. And then, of course, moving on to the last piece here, healthy toast, refreshing toast, and luck. Ideally, I would like regenerating here if I could get it instead of luck, but hey, it's the Iron Man game, and you gotta work with what you get, I guess. Healthy toast, refreshing toast, absolutely best in slot though. And then again, the resists, big focus on thrust damage, the Ellie aversion giving us that elemental damage reduction against a majority of incoming elemental attacks. And then for the ultimate, I've gone with the cannon blast that has the explosive radius, because this is much easier to land on someone than just the cannon shot itself. It does quite a lot of damage, and the burn is very strong too. I really like the cannon blast because you can hit it as an AoE, so pair it with the Firestaff's AoE and you get a ton of power. There's a couple clips in this video, you'll see that AoE power really coming out strong. So you could go with a different heart rune here if you want. Stoneform and the vines are both really good options too. This is just the only one I have on my Iron Man at the moment. Of course, for your supplies, you want to use regular potions, you want to use regen potions, and you want to have mana pots because of that healthy toast giving you a little bit more healing. Mana-wise, this build sustains just fine from the dodge roll, so you don't have to worry too much about it because of that, but the healing, man, definitely want that. And then for the food, I have a T5 Poacher's Pie, the intel and the dex that it gives. And of course, you're going to want to run the Honing Stones if you can for even more additional damage for your build. Now, moving on to the weapon mastery, starting off with the Rapier. I am running my favorite Rapier tree that I've been running for a few months now. Really, really like it. Full on in evade and flesh, fantastic skills for mobility and offense, both of them. And then I've gone into the first 3 points of Flourish and Finish just to get the actual combo move itself, have the grit, and then get the stamina when landing the finish as well. This is a pretty big deal for the stam sustain of this skill. I really like Flourish and Finish a lot. They did nerf it this patch. The Flourish portion deals less damage and you don't stagger on the finish. Still a really, really good skill though, even if you're not stacking bleeds. The control that it gives, the access to grit, and the mobility and range of the finish. really nice. For the Rapier, of course, I've gone with the Momentum. If you're using an Evade Rapier setup, Momentum is probably the best passive or ultimate passive to get, unless you're going for that full build setup. Swiftness for the additional haste, super big. Red Curtains, critical strikes will reduce all cooldowns, really nice for our sustain. Controlled breathing, we talked about this a little earlier. The reason why you want to have all those extra bleeds or attunement effects on your Rapier is for the additional sustain you will get from controlled breathing. Of course, the damage over time from the Rune Glass gem is going to play really big into that too. 10% more damage from Desperation, 10% more damage from On Guard as well, as long as you meet the conditions. And then Refreshing Strikes, again, playing into those additional effects from Rapier. The more bleeds you have, the more dots coming out, the more cooldown you will get on your Rapier skills. Now, moving on to the Fire Staff. There have been a lot of changes to Fire Staff. In general, I don't think Fire Staff is necessarily feeling stronger than it used to feel, but it synergizes better with itself, and I think the weapon just feels cleaner to play now. Buildcraft-wise, I do like what they've done with Fire Staff, just kind of opening up your options a bit too, giving you different attractive options to choose from. So, the skills that I've gone for, of course, Fireball, Pillar of Fire, and Burnout. Burnout, I wanted to get all 3 points in for that big explosion at the end from Heated Up. As for Pillar of Fire, I didn't invest into the last point because that's going to be mana sustain. Same with Fireball, mana sustain and cooldown reduction. I didn't want to put the point in there if I didn't have to, so that's why I've only gone for the first 2 points, as the second points are also damage increasing for it. We don't need to worry about the mana sustain on this build anyway. And then for the Fire Mage tree, I put a lot of points in here. Heavy attack reduction, this was the last point I had to put in to get the Runes of Helios, so that's really why I have that there. Clear Mind for the additional damage when you're above a certain amount of mana. Light and heavy attacks will inflict smolder on foes. Super big for the Fire Staff, especially since that's attached to heavies now. Clear Casting for the additional damage. And then, of course, Spellslinger for that increased critical chance. And then Prophet of a Fire God for that additional critical damage. And then, of course, Runes of Helios. You really have the choice between this or the Backdraft, and I'll be honest, when you hit someone with a heavy attack on Backdraft, you remove the burns from them. If you just don't use Backdraft and let the burns tick, if he eats 2 seconds of those burns, it's like you hit him with that heavy attack anyway. Runes of Helios, hands down, the way to go. Backdraft is nowhere near as good. I don't know. I don't think Backdraft is good. I would love to hear you guys' thoughts on it, but definitely Runes of Helios. And then Pyromania for that additional damage against an opponent with a burn or a smolder. It's going to be most people you fight. The Let It Burn for the Fortify, again, because we're in light armor and the whole Fortify increasing your armor now. With the Invigorated Ring, this is still going to be a net, I think, damage reduction for you. It's not going to be a bad perk to take. I'd have to test this a little bit more. I don't know what % of Fortify becomes bad for your build when you're in light armor. So 10% I think is high enough that it's still in the safe mark. And then Kindle, Smolder lasts 20% longer, of course. Watch It Burn for the critical hits, adding more Smolder. And of course, that combat speed. All right, let's get into that PvP commentary. The first clip here, one of many OPR clips for you guys. Hanging out at the enemy spawn, just broke through the door. Actually, I think I ran around to the door, and there's one guy on the spawner. He ends up running to the back of the pillar there, so I just attack the spawner to try to get rid of it. And another guy ends up spawning in, and I start throwing down the AoEs with the Fire Staff. Go for the Pillar of Fire into the Burnout, and then throw down the Fireball as well. Got some decent AoE coverage there, but right away, lots of enemy players starting to spawn on that spawner, so I'm just going to retreat back outside. As one player comes over me, I just end up crossing back over him, and then turn around, do get a Fireball into the healer there, and then I go for the Burnout through the doorway. Get coverage on everyone. Huge cannon shot. There's the Fireball into the pillar, and I bring one player down on the stack, almost bringing the second player down. And I just managed to escape using the evade rolls and flesh from Rapier and break distance back outside. Especially this build, fighting against a lot of players, I find you definitely want to go through them as often as possible instead of trying to run away because they just chase. When you go through, you force that turnaround. And that's the only reason I think I was able to get out of that alive. But these guys end up piling up around the corner here. So I'm just going to retreat a little bit. One of them ends up following me, and I throw the Fireball down on him. Do manage to catch him with the Burnout. And then there's a big Pillar of Fire connection, and the Rapier to finish him off. He just can't get away in time. And then I see some more enemy players starting to attack the other friendly that's here. And I'm just going to start working on this enemy Void Gauntlet player here. Void Gauntlet can be kind of scary to fight at times. And this guy, if I remember correctly, played it quite well. So I had a lot of issues putting good offensive pressure into him. And you can see he's got a lot of close range attacks that are pretty dangerous to me there. So I managed to bait out the Ice Spike. Go for a bit of damage with the Fire Staff. Unfortunately, 2 more players end up coming here, so I'm just going to retreat a little bit, using the terrain as best as I can to try to line of sight, and eventually I get hit by the train, and down I go. Moving on to the next fight, again in OPR, this time at the enemy actual respawn point, not just their outpost. And I end up running into the back here. This guy throws the flamethrower down. I'm just kind of stuck in the rocks, so I break a bit of distance from him. A good read on that incoming stun. I managed to dodge it, and that was a very risky burnout to go for. If I wasn't at full health, I probably would have died there. So I do manage to break that distance effectively and get to cover and get my potions in time. This guy's charging after me. He's got the greatsword out. He has the explosive ultimate ready. I just managed to break the distance as he goes for his move there and go for a bit of pressure back on him, but he sticks right to me with the blunderbuss. Again, instead of going back around the corner, I go back through the enemy player, force his turnaround, and that's going to work well too because there's more players around that corner shooting at me. There you see I do take some big damage from a Fire Staff player up top there too. Either way, I managed to break a little bit more distance from the top there. I just end up holding the heavy attack. I do eat his greatsword move, but I land the heavy into the evade, so I think that was a good trade for me and a big connection on the fireball to finish that guy off. The mob goes down to the burn, and it looks like the Fire Staff player that was up top there jumped down. He's now shooting me with his blunderbuss. I get a connection with the explosion on burnout. Again, he just goes for flamethrower. Flamethrower, I mean, it's not a bad skill, but against my build, especially if my Flourish and Finish is up, Flamethrower is not a good move to use against it. And there you see, he's in the Flamethrower. He just eats the stagger into the rest of the combo. And I managed to quickly bring down the Fire Mage Blunderbuss player. And now the Greatsword guy comes back out again. I've got an Archer behind me, it looks like shooting at me too. And one NPC as well. And he goes for the Skyward Slash, and I honestly thought I was safe. He spammed the sword just at the last moment, and then he lands this stagger and a connection from the blunderbuss, and I end up going down. Moving on to the next fight, again, hanging out at that enemy outpost. This is where I get all the best fights, and this one here, just a little compilation of some damage. 2 players going down to the Fire Staff burst, and the combo of this guy dying with his greatsword, the friendly player, and my Fire Staff managed to bring down the 3rd player. And I like this clip here just to show off the mobility to burst of this build. There you see all the enemy players inside their spawn, and I managed to get behind that guy, work a few light attacks in after landing the Fire Staff combo, and I'm able to bring him down. And moving on to the final clip for the video, this one is actually a little bit more of a group fight. Now, I'm not in comms or anything with these guys, but they're on the flag with me, and we end up getting pressured by a lot of enemy players here, so I did want to include this one. Of course, I know a lot of you guys are going to be playing group PvP as well, so show this build in a bit of a group situation. And not just that, one of the people here is also running Fire Staff and Rapier. I think he has the same skill loadout that I do too for his abilities, so you get to see both of the builds working in tandem. And yeah, this is all what it's about. You see there, they start piling on one of us and we start kiting, and the other players that are friendly here are going to try to go for pressure. I go back through the middle of the group, take an insane amount of damage, and again, I just gas my stand bar, get to the heals in time. I'm going to come back around the corner. That guy, try to throw a fireball at him as he heals. And it looks like they're all on the flag chasing after one of our friendlies. Huge damage with the heavy into the fireball. There's the pillar and another heavy connection. I managed to kill one of the enemy players, and our friendly mage at the other side at the top, managing to get a kill on another one of the enemy players. And I retreat back out again, having taken quite a bit of damage, quickly heal up. And I'm going to go for pressure again here, and we've got this very tanky Void Gauntlet, Ice Gauntlet player. Very dangerous setup to fight as well. And I try to go for the burnout to get a connection with the explosion. Unfortunately, I end up missing. Go for the Flourish and Finish combo there. That ended up working well to interrupt the Blunderbuss combo. However, I still did take a lot of damage. But again, the mobility of the build, quickly in and out, re-heal, and then re-engage. And here I just get weird reads. He ends up changing directions when I didn't think he would, so I threw the fireball in front of him and behind him with a pillar, but that's okay. They're going to end up chasing Story out here, and I throw a few fireballs into them, seeing a lot of range pressure coming to me. I head back in towards the outpost, but There's still quite a few guys in here. It's not really a safe place to be. I push towards the enemy healer, decide I'm going to burn out of there to try to get a combo on this archer. I do manage to hit him with the beginning of the flourish and finish, and I believe that was Story with the big combo there, finishing him off, and I just get him with a poke too, and we bring that guy down, and the rest of the enemy players just hard on Story's tail here. I'm just going to throw the cannon at them. Here I do a good job just taking the pressure off of him so he can heal. And then again, I'm just going to go right into my mobility with the fire staff and split these guys up a little bit more. And well, I'll let you guys enjoy the rest of this fight as I say goodbye. Of course, if you want to catch me live on Twitch, there's a link down below. You can find a written guide to this build on my website, pvpnewworld.com. And I do the New World Top 5 fights, so if you have an awesome clip that you want to see featured on the channel, you can send that to Kristofer at pvpnewworld.com. A quick shout out to our sponsor, ExpressVPN. If you guys want to get a deal with your first purchase with them, you can with the link below. And of course, thank you so much to all of my patrons on Patreon for supporting the show. Thank you guys so much for watching. Honestly, this build is a lot of fun this patch, so I hope you guys enjoy at least watching it and maybe give it a try yourself. As always, I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you're looking forward to more. Have a good night, everybody. I'll see you next time.